The hum of the climate control was the only sound filling the glass office, blending with the muted sounds of tapping keyboards and muffled conversations outside my door. I sat perfectly still, elbows resting on the cool surface of my desk, fingers steepled beneath my chin. My eyes were locked on the wedding photo in the silver frame, the one I used to keep as a beacon of hope, a reminder that I'd built something solid. Now, it sat there like a mockery. A carefully posed lie. The light hit it just right in the mid-morning sun. Damon's smile looked authentic, even warm. My own eyes in the photo were soft, the way I remember feeling that day, held together by hope, by belief. But lately, that glow had shifted into something more sterile. The longer I stared at the picture, the more I realized how little comfort it gave me now. Beyond the glass, Rosebridge looked like a painting, all tidy sidewalks and windswept trees. Nuvexa Biopharma's headquarters was perched like a crown jewel among it all. And I was supposed to feel proud. I had risen to compliance manager before 40. I had the office with the view, the crisp wardrobe, the polished voice people respected in every regulatory meeting. And still, I was invisible. The memory of Sunday brunch crept in uninvited. Brielle, radiant in her flowing sundress, had arrived late, but still managed to command the entire table. Her stories were louder, her laughter exaggerated. Our parents, Roger and Delia, leaned in like she was the sun itself. And me? I was barely acknowledged, unless the topic turned to taxes or legal updates. Then they'd glance my way, as if I were a human spreadsheet. It had always been this way. I remember coming home with straight A's while Brielle showed off a sash from her school's spring pageant. Our parents barely asked about my exams. They were too busy helping her pick out new heels for a local parade. I stopped expecting praise around age 11. By high school, I learned to wear silence like armor. I didn't hate her. I didn't even envy her, not exactly. But I understood early on that in our family, charm trumped consistency. And Brielle? She had charm in spades. She could be late, reckless, messy, but the family adored her for being real. I was the stable one, the organized one, the responsible shadow that kept everything from collapsing. The world outside my office blurred for a second, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. Dark tailored blazer, understated makeup, eyes just sharp enough to command attention. To most people, I was composed, in control. Emotionally distant, maybe. But not cold. I wasn't cold. Still, there were moments like this, sitting here with too much quiet, where I wondered what it would have been like to be seen. Really seen. Not just for what I could solve, but for who I was. I tapped my pen once against my notepad, bringing myself back. There were compliance reports to review, meetings to prep for. But my gaze drifted again, not to the photo this time, but to the plaque behind me. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. I'd clung to that quote for years, convinced that if I made excellence my habit, I'd finally be enough. Enough for my family to notice. Enough for Damon to love without drifting. Enough for me to stop measuring my worth by other people's silence. But being excellent hadn't changed anything. Damon still came home distracted, eyes always on his phone, laughter reserved for someone else. My parents still compared me to Brielle without realizing they were doing it. I'd once believed that love was a prize earned through hard work, that if I just kept showing up, kept performing, kept excelling, eventually the scales would tip. That belief had carried me through too many years. It had brought me here, to a pristine office with a prestigious title and a marriage that was, quietly, decaying. I rose from my chair and walked toward the window, arms crossed, letting the light wash over me. Below, a courier was unloading boxes and a group of interns giggled near the courtyard fountain. Life continued, ignorant of the quiet ache beneath my ribcage. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket and hovered my thumb over Damon's name. There was a time I'd text him midday just to say I missed him. Now, I hesitated to even press call. What would I say? Hey, remember when we used to laugh in the kitchen while making dinner? Remember when we believed in each other? Instead, I opened my calendar, scanned through the day's meetings, and sank back into my chair. Focus. That's what I was good at. Focus, order, precision. Not feelings. My phone buzzed. A group text from my mother. A photo of Brielle holding a coffee cup, captioned, "Guess who's glowing this morning?" I didn't respond. The egg turned to steel. I wasn't angry, not exactly. But something was shifting. That glow in the photo, the way my mother still saw Brielle like she hung the stars, the way Damon looked more and more like a stranger in my bed, it all fed into a slow, quiet realization. Love couldn't be earned from people who were never offering it freely. And excellence, no matter how flawlessly I wore it, wouldn't make me visible to those who chose to look past me. I closed the group text, turned my phone over, and took a deep breath. No one had to validate me anymore. That time was over. I had built a life with my own two hands. Even if no one clapped for it, I would. And from this moment forward, I would no longer pretend to be content in a world that refused to see me. Let them keep their glow. I had my glare, and it would light the way. The break room was unusually quiet. For once, no one was burning popcorn or loudly recapping the latest dating reality show. I welcomed the calm. My heels clicked lightly on the tile as I crossed to the far end of the long oak table and sat in my usual corner seat, right beneath the vent. The familiar hum of the espresso machine was oddly soothing. I pulled out my phone 15 minutes to breathe before the next round of compliance reviews. I wasn't looking for anything. Just a few minutes of mindless scrolling, a quick dopamine hit before I returned to deadlines and data points. YouTube was my go-to. Not to post. Never that, just to lurk. Architecture tours, ASMR paper-cutting videos, the occasional baking fail. My algorithm had been fairly predictable until recently. Lately, it had started offering family vloggers. Probably because I'd clicked on one of Brielle's older videos last week, mostly out of curiosity. Or masochism. Hard to tell with siblings. I should have ignored the new thumbnail. I should have just opened a tour of mid-century homes or tuned into a New York pianist unboxing candles. But I didn't. Instead, I saw the title, "Welcome to the World, Little Isla," in Brielle's curlicue font. I blinked. Stared. Read it again. My thumb hovered over the play button, heart already pounding. She had a baby? There was no family group text, no calls, no announcement. Not even one of my mother's over-the-top, "Look who made me a nana," posts. This had to be a joke. Or a ploy. Brielle was always one for grand entrances. But the thumbnail was too real. She was in a hospital bed, cheeks flushed, hair styled a little too perfectly for post-labor. And in her arms, a bundle swaddled in pastel yellow. I tapped the video before my brain could intervene. The hospital room came into view, softly lit. Background music played, some royalty-free lullaby track. Brielle beamed at the camera as if auditioning for a soap opera. "She's here," she whispered, eyes wet. "Our beautiful baby girl. Meet Isla Rose." I froze. "Our?" The camera panned slowly to show my parents on either side of the bed, both grinning like it was Christmas morning. My mother reached over to brush a curl from Brielle's forehead. My father lifted a tiny socked foot with reverence. Everyone was glowing. Everyone, except me. I wasn't there. I wasn't mentioned. And then my gaze snagged on a detail so small, so out of place, it felt like a punch to the gut. In the corner of the screen, just behind the hospital bassinet, sat a worn leather wallet. Dark brown, with a faded monogram on the edge. Right beside it, a brushed steel keychain, the same one I gave Damon for our second anniversary. His initials engraved in tiny script. "No, no, no." He said he was in Denver. He had flown out Monday morning, suitcase in hand, suit pressed, itinerary forwarded to me like always. I didn't even question it. Business trips were part of our rhythm. I was used to being alone during the week. I even remembered what he wore: navy slacks, pale blue shirt, no tie. His client lunch outfit. But that wallet. I knew it like my own breath. I had bought it. The keychain, too. Little things he never bothered to change, always claiming they were lucky. I replayed the video. This time, I didn't focus on Brielle's face or the soft pastel blankets. I scanned every corner. In a clip further in, the camera caught a deeper view of the room. A man's hand passed Isla a pacifier. The frame barely showed his arm, the cuff of his blazer. But I recognized it. I had ironed that exact blazer before he left for the airport. My pulse thudded in my ears. I felt my hands trembling, but I wouldn't let them shake. Think. Breathe. Don't react, respond. I paused the video and took a screenshot. Then another. Then several more. I zoomed in on the wallet. The keychain. The hand. I copied the link and pasted it into my notes. I created a folder titled BRIL in my phone's cloud drive and uploaded the images. Then I backed them up to my work email with a vague subject line, vendor notes. No one at Nevexa would ever open that. Not yet. Panic flickered in my chest like a lighter trying to catch. But I'd been trained too well to let it flame. Regulatory compliance demanded precision under pressure. I had learned how to keep my tone calm while flagging violations that could cost millions. This was no different. Just a different kind of fraud. I exhaled slowly and took a long sip of my now cold coffee. So, Damon was not in Denver. He was in Rosebridge, at St. Helene's Medical Center, with my sister, for the birth of a child. My husband, my sister, my parents. My hands didn't shake anymore. I pressed play again. At the end of the video, Brielle whispered something into the camera, kissing Isla's forehead. We can't wait to share this journey with you. Thank you for being part of our little miracle. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Part of their miracle. Was that what this was? A miracle? Or was it the culmination of every shadow I had ever ignored? Every moment I told myself I was just being paranoid? All the times Damon came home late or smiled when his phone lit up, a smile I hadn't seen in years. I glanced at the clock. 9 minutes left on my break. No tears. No breakdowns. Not here. Not yet. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked slowly back to my office. Each step felt calculated, as though I were performing a scene. I shut the door gently behind me, lowered the blinds, and sat at my desk. Then I opened my laptop. And I began a document. Not a journal. A case file. Subject: Damon Grant. Date: March 17th. Incident: suspected extramarital affair. Evidence gathered via YouTube video on Brielle Grant's personal channel. Screenshots attached. Timeline noted. Metadata recorded. The lawyer in me stirred. The woman who had been raised on disappointment, she had already gone quiet. She was stepping aside. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would gather facts. And I would act. Not because I needed revenge. Because I needed the truth. And I needed it to be mine. The office door clicked shut behind me with a soft finality, and I leaned back in my chair as though anchoring myself to something solid. The folder I'd created. The one labeled BRIEL now contained timestamps, screenshots, and video links. The images I couldn't unsee. Damon's wallet. His keychain. His hand. A newborn cradled by my sister, with my husband lurking in the background like a shadow wearing his skin. But what I had now were fragments. Proof to me, yes. But emotion wasn't admissible. I needed more, thorough, objective documentation. No missteps. No hunches. Just facts. My marriage, my reputation, and my sanity demanded as much. That was when I opened a new browser tab and typed in the name I hadn't needed to call in years, Slate Bridge Investigations. I'd used them once before, not for something personal, but during a high-profile regulatory sweep at Nevexa. They were discreet, competent, unshakable. I remembered being impressed by their founder, Miles Avery. Clean-cut, strategic mind, no interest in gossip. Exactly the kind of person I needed now. I clicked the private inquiry form and filled it out line by line, specifying the urgency. At the bottom, I typed one line, request call with Miles Avery, personal matter. Highly confidential. I was barely back into the day's workflow when my cell buzzed. Unknown number. Slate Bridge, no doubt. I stepped out of my office, past the reception desk with a nod, and walked briskly to the side stairwell. I needed quiet. I needed privacy. As the door clicked behind me, I answered. This is Marissa Grant. A beat, then a deep, even voice replied, Ms. Grant, This is Miles Avery returning your request. I have a window now, if that works. His voice hadn't changed. Still clear, composed, never rushed. Yes, I said. Now is perfect. Tell me what's going on. I inhaled slowly, as if that would steady the truth. It's about my husband, Damon Grant. And my sister, Brielle. Silence stretched just long enough to let me know he was listening, not judging. I believe they're in a relationship. I suspect an affair. Possibly more. I have video evidence from Brielle's YouTube channel. It was uploaded within the last week. In it, she's giving birth. That's quite the starting point, he said softly, still neutral. In the video, my parents are present, I continued. My husband was supposed to be in Denver on business. Instead, he was there, in the hospital room. His wallet and keychain are visible. I recognized them immediately. Later, you can hear him, his voice off camera. You're certain it's him? 100%. And the timeline of this alleged trip? He left on a Monday. Said he'd return Friday. The video was uploaded Wednesday evening. The birth likely happened between Tuesday and Wednesday based on timestamps. The hospital is St. Helene's Medical Center here in Rosebridge. Understood, Miles said, tapping keys in the background. Do you want surveillance? Asset tracking? We offer full documentation for legal proceedings. Yes, all of it, I said without hesitation. I want travel records, hotel stays, credit card charges, phone logs, location pings if possible. I want to know how long this has been going on. I want to know if my parents were involved. If they knew. He paused again. You're asking for a full background investigation on all 4 individuals? Yes. Damon, Brielle, my mother Delia Grant, and my father Roger Grant. I said their names like they belonged in a deposition. Because maybe they did. I can assign 2 of my best investigators to the case. We'll start with digital footprints and financial patterns. We'll expand to in-person surveillance if needed. Do you have access to any of Damon's devices? I do, I said. His work laptop when he leaves at home. I've never gone through it. But I can. Don't alter anything or log in unless instructed. Forward any suspicious screenshots or links directly to me. We'll use metadata where possible. Do you have a safe email to use for communication? Yes. Personal Gmail. I'll send that now. And how private should we keep this? No traces. No names outside your team. Use code references if you must. Miles cleared his throat. Understood. If I may ask, what outcome are you preparing for? The question hovered, uncomfortably honest. I stared at the wall in the stairwell, where a patch of old paint peeled like something shedding its skin. I'm preparing for the end of my marriage, I said quietly. And the start of a very long reckoning. There it was. Said aloud. Not rage. Not panic. Just the truth, spoken like a filing note. He didn't flinch. Then we'll be thorough. We'll keep it discreet. You'll receive encrypted updates starting within 72 hours. I'll be your direct point of contact. Thank you, I said. I meant it. After we hung up, I stood there for a few long seconds, my phone still pressed to my ear like I didn't want to let go of the weight his voice carried. Steady. Rational. A contrast to the spiral that had opened under my feet. I returned to my office with a strange clarity. The world hadn't ended, not yet, but the countdown had begun. At my desk, I typed the follow-up email to Miles, including the link to the video, a few of the high-resolution screenshots, and a subject line that made my stomach clench. Brielle, Isla birth video, evidence. The cursor blinked at the end of the message like a heartbeat. I hovered over send for a moment, then pressed it. It was done. By the time the afternoon meeting started, I was seated at the head of the table with my tablet open, face composed, voice even. Regulatory updates. Risk assessments. Cost projections. I answered every question. Made every correction. Delegated tasks with precision. No one saw the war brewing behind my eyes. No one knew that I had just activated a private investigation that might unravel every pillar of my life. But then again, no one had ever really seen me at all. As the meeting ended, I gathered my things and walked back to my office. One of the interns passed by and smiled nervously. Your presentation was amazing, Ms. Grant. I nodded once. Thank you. When I sat down again, I didn't look at the wedding photo. I didn't need to. I had moved beyond symbols. What I needed now was truth. And I would have it. The email came in at 6:02 a.m., subject line, Preliminary Findings, Phase 1. Just those 4 words, but my pulse kicked up as I stared at it from my kitchen island, coffee untouched, sunlight just beginning to filter through the blinds. I'd been up since 5. Sleep had become a luxury lately, my brain never quite powered down anymore. Even my dreams were suspicious. But now I had something concrete. I clicked the email with a steadiness that felt rehearsed. I'd waited days for this. I was ready. Miles had formatted it like a legal brief, clean and structured. There were attachments, images, statements, hotel records, phone logs. I opened the PDF labeled Summary Report. It began with a simple line. Subject Damon Grant did not travel to Denver, Colorado on March 11th as reported to spouse Marissa Grant. No flight reservations, car rentals, or lodging in Denver were found under his name or affiliated business accounts. I nodded once, just once, as if to myself. Instead, Damon had checked into a suite at the Viridian Grand Hotel, just 12 blocks from St. Helene's Medical Center. Check-in, March 11th, 3:42 p.m. Checkout, March 14th, 11:01 a.m. Paid in full using our shared visa, the one I used to order groceries. The statement was included. My stomach tightened. The report continued, hotel surveillance footage. Images captured Damon entering and exiting the building multiple times, often with Brielle Grant, who arrived from the north entrance using a rideshare registered under a dummy account. Her face, her voice, her movements, all confirmed via cross-reference with her public vlogs. The camera caught them together in the hotel lobby, the elevator, the corridor outside their suite, hands brushing, shoulders leaning in, Damon laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years. My fingers clenched around the edges of my tablet. Under Financial Activity, Slatebridge had listed several transactions, boutique baby stores, prenatal wellness spas, even a reserved suite at a maternity photography studio 3 months prior. And there it was, the purchase I'd dismissed when the credit card alert pinged me weeks ago. Tiny Petal and Company, $746.19. He told me it was a client's baby shower gift. I believed him. Then came the voice analysis. Miles had his team scrape audio from 5 of Brielle's recent vlogs. In at least 3, Damon's voice was identified in the background, faint, but distinguishable. Once, he asked for oat milk. Another time, he laughed and called someone Squish, the same nickname he gave our cat when we first brought her home. But I hadn't seen him interact with the cat in months. Then came the phone records. Over 500 calls between Damon and Brielle in less than 12 months. Most placed between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. I closed the tablet slowly, not slamming it, not letting it win. I rose and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet, save for a jogger and a dog tugging on its leash. To them, it was just another morning. But inside me, the last illusion I had clung to was turning to ash. I picked up my phone and dialed Miles. He answered on the second ring. Good morning, Ms. Grant. Your team did excellent work, I said, and I meant it. Do you have anything yet on my parents? There was a pause. We do. Would you like the summary verbally first? Yes. Miles cleared his throat. Your mother Delia communicated with Brielle almost daily for the past 6 months. Most interactions were standard, grocery lists, community fundraisers, but there were flagged keywords. Appointment, car seat, his schedule, no telling Marissa yet. My jaw tightened. So she knew. It appears so, he said gently. Your father, Roger, is less involved digitally. But one voicemail from his number, dated 3 weeks ago, includes the line, "We'll stand behind you no matter what. She'll adjust in time. She'll adjust in time." My hands shook then, for real this time. I set the phone down on speaker and let the audio wash over me. We're continuing to compile direct evidence, Miles added. But preliminary findings indicate willful concealment from all parties. I didn't reply right away. My mind spiraled through holidays, birthdays, quiet dinners where my parents asked nothing of substance about my life, but always checked in on Brielle's job. The city was still waking up when I slid into my office at Navexa, a to-go cup of espresso in one hand and a slim leather folder in the other. My heels clicked softly on the marble floor, and the sound felt grounding, rhythmic, like I was rehearsing something only I needed to hear. The weight of what I carried, physically and mentally, should have felt crushing. But I wasn't crushed. Not anymore. I closed the door behind me, drew the blinds halfway, and exhaled slowly. Today would be about structure. About strategy. My world had cracked open. No, it had been shattered by the truth, but that didn't mean I had to fall with it. I was a compliance officer, a rule enforcer. I lived in procedure, order, clarity. And now I was turning that training inward. I opened the folder and laid out the first printouts from Slatebridge. Color-coded tabs. Photos. Transcripts. Summaries of hotel visits. Credit card breakdowns. All methodical. All damning. In another context, it could have been a corporate scandal. But this one lived in my home, slept beside me, shared my dinner plates. My husband. My sister. My parents. The whole thing read like fiction. I reached for my phone and scrolled to the contact labeled Talia Monroe. We'd gone to law school together, though we moved in different circles. She was fierce in court and had transitioned into family law after watching too many friends suffer through aimless, exhausting divorces. She was the one I'd refer people to when things got personal, when someone needed to divide a life with precision. I never thought I'd be the one making the call. She answered on the second ring. Marissa Grant. It's been a while. I sat, shoulders back. Talia, I need you. Professionally. A pause. Then her voice lowered. Tell me. I'm initiating divorce proceedings. My husband's been having a long-term affair. With my sister. Talia didn't gasp. Didn't interrupt. She just waited. I have documentation, I continued. An investigation has been ongoing. I want everything in motion before anyone else can react. What about assets? Prenup? No prenup, I said. Assets are shared. We have 2 joint accounts. The house is in both our names, but I'll be moving to liquidate it eventually. No children, thank God. And you want to go aggressive or amicable? I let the question linger. Part of me had asked that very thing in the dark, between email scans and shower reflections. What would hurt more, making it quiet or letting it bleed in public? Strategic, I said finally. Measured. No mercy. No theatrics. Understood. We agreed to meet the next day to go over the paperwork. I'd bring the files from Slatebridge, and she'd handle the rest, court filings, financial restraining orders, early discovery requests. I hung up feeling something dangerous simmering under my skin, not rage, but readiness. I wasn't walking into a courtroom blind. I was arming myself for a necessary war. Later that morning, I turned to a different priority. I sent an encrypted message to Miles, asking his team to continue the background checks. I wanted full reports on Damon's company, Strathmore Equity, and Brielle's employer, St. Helene's Medical Center. I knew Brielle had passed her nursing exam years ago, but her license, her position, they would all be relevant now. If they wanted to violate the trust of others, maybe they shouldn't be in positions of care or influence. That's what I told myself. But beneath that logic was a burn far deeper. They had disrespected me, minimized me, manipulated me, and I would not let them continue unchecked. By lunch, I was cross-referencing timelines. Slatebridge's updates had become routine. Damon had been secretly attending prenatal appointments with Brielle for months. Ultrasound images. Birthing classes. Even a registry at an exclusive baby boutique under the name BD Family. It wasn't subtle. They didn't bother to hide it from the world, only from me. A ping from Miles appeared mid-afternoon. They'd found something. Subject line. Grant/family. Confirmed knowledge and complicity. Attached were screenshots of text threads between my mother and Brielle. Delia, is Damon coming to the checkup today? You said it's the one with the heartbeat monitor, right? Brielle, yeah. He's picking me up. I just don't want Marissa finding out yet. She's been acting weird. Delia, You know how she is. All control, no softness. Just focus on the baby. Control. No softness. That line gutted me more than I expected. So that's how they saw me, my own mother. My measured nature, my independence, my refusal to fall apart, all twisted into something cold, something undesirable. But I didn't cry. I saved the screenshots, uploaded them into the folder, and moved on. That evening, I opened my laptop at home and began writing a formal ethics complaint draft, not as a scorned wife, but as a compliance professional. I outlined the potential conflict of interest Damon might have engaged in at Strathmore Equity, using joint funds, misreporting travel expenses, engaging in undisclosed relationships that could violate internal HR policy. I drafted another for Brielle, a complaint to the St. Helene's Medical Licensing Board. Nurses were expected to uphold public trust. Documented deceit, questionable judgment, and manipulation of patients' relatives could be considered grounds for review, especially when layered with misuse of hospital property for social media gain. These weren't emotional attacks. They were logical, documented, and methodical. They would not see me coming. Because they never had. By midnight, I had 2 full complaint templates saved in my next steps folder. Before bed, I went to my closet, pulled down the wedding photo, and placed it face down in a drawer. I didn't break it. I didn't throw it. There was no cinematic outburst. Just a quiet removal. It no longer belonged on display. As I stood in the silence of my bedroom, I thought about the difference between power and reaction. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. And every move from here on out, every report, every call, every form, would be made with surgical precision. Not just because I could, but because I must. They underestimated the quiet one. And now they'd learn, silence was never weakness. It was strategy. The morning of the gathering arrived shrouded in unnatural stillness, like the hush that falls before a storm that everyone knows is coming but pretends won't hit them. I stood in front of my mirror, fastening the pearl earrings Damon had once given me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Gifts meant to symbolize loyalty, now worn like battle armor. My tailored black blouse felt like a second skin. Sharp. Controlled. Not mourning. Not rage. Just deliberate. Talia arrived at my house right on time, as expected. She stepped inside in a midnight blue suit and boots that clicked with confidence. Her briefcase matched her tone, sleek, professional, ruthless. "You sure about this?" she asked as we stepped out into the crisp Rosebridge morning. I didn't answer right away. I slid into the passenger seat of her sedan, fingers resting on the folder in my lap, the one filled with timelines, hotel receipts, surveillance stills, and transcripts. "Yes," I said finally. "It's time." The drive to my childhood home was eerily familiar. Every bend in the road felt like a memory waiting to be rewritten. I stared out the window, watching as we passed the same grocery store where I once begged my mother to buy me a chemistry kit instead of a Barbie. The park where I learned to ride a bike alone, because Brielle was throwing a tantrum and all eyes were on her. Each stoplight flickered like a checkpoint in a game I was done playing. When we pulled into the driveway, I spotted Damon's car already parked neatly at the curb. A pang of recognition hit me in the chest, but I buried it. I had studied the art of compartmentalization long before this betrayal ever arrived. Talia turned off the engine. "Do you want me to lead?" "No," I said, straightening my spine. "I'll speak first. You come in when I ask." She gave me a short nod and stayed in the car, phone already in hand to document anything if needed. I walked up the path slowly, savoring each step. The door opened before I knocked. My mother's face appeared, composed but strained, like she already knew this wasn't going to be a Hallmark reunion. "Marissa," she said with forced brightness. "Come in, sweetheart." I stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and something freshly baked. Warmth trying to disguise rot. They were all there as planned. Damon stood awkwardly near the fireplace, hands in his pockets, hair messier than usual. Brielle sat on the couch with the baby cradled against her chest, face scrubbed clean but eyes defiant. And my father, he rose from his chair as if the act of standing was going to make him more honorable. No one spoke. I walked calmly to the coffee table and placed the folder down. I opened it, flipped to the first page, and slid it toward Damon. "This," I said, "is the receipt from the Viridian Grand Hotel. You checked in the same day you told me you flew to Denver. Room 509. He blinked, lips parting like he was about to deny it, then closed them. I continued. "These are time-stamped images from the lobby and elevator. That's you. That's Brielle. Together. Multiple times." I turned to the next page. "Here are your credit card transactions, prenatal spa visits, baby boutiques, a prenatal photographer. And this is a screenshot from Brielle's YouTube vlog, the one where she gives birth. That's your wallet. Your keychain. Your hand passing her the pacifier." Brielle scoffed. "Are you seriously showing off screenshots like this as some court case?" I met her eyes. "It is. You just don't know it yet." Her mouth twitched. I shifted my attention to my parents. "You both knew." I pulled out the printed text messages. "Mom, this is you talking about Damon picking Brielle up for a checkup. You didn't even try to hide it." "Dad, this voicemail, Sheila just in time? That's what you told her about me." My mother's face blanched, but she didn't respond. My father rubbed his temple, suddenly deeply interested in the rug beneath his feet. Damon stepped forward, palms out. "Marissa, I never meant for this to." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult me with half apologies. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice." Repeatedly. A year's worth of choices. Brielle adjusted the baby and glared. "You act like you were so perfect. Always judging, always distant. You think being cold makes you superior? You never let people in. Not even him." A hollow laugh escaped me. "You think this is about emotional proximity? You seduced my husband. Lied to my face. Carried a child with the man I married. And you want to talk about me being cold?" The room fell into heavy silence. That's when I turned toward the door. "Talia." She entered without hesitation, setting her briefcase on the table beside the folder. "This is Talia Monroe. She's my attorney. She's handling the divorce proceedings and legal communications going forward." Damon's jaw dropped slightly. "You're already filing?" "It's already in motion," Talia said, flipping open her case. "And I suggest you respond promptly. There are financial assets to divide, and given recent behavior, we'll be pursuing damages." "I have a baby," Brielle hissed. "You're seriously trying to ruin our lives when I'm dealing with." "I'm not ruining your life," I said, voice calm. "I'm removing myself from the one you tried to ruin." I looked down at the baby for the first time, a tiny face, sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding her. My gaze lingered for only a second. Then I looked back at Brielle, at Damon, at the parents who had raised me to believe that performance equaled love. "This house will be sold," I said. "I'm not subsidizing the silence you all use to protect yourselves. The truth has costs. You can pay them now." No one said a word. I gathered the folder, tucked it under my arm, and nodded once at Talia. "Let's go." As we walked out, I felt no thrill, no triumph, just clarity. The kind that arrives when you've burned everything down and realize you're still standing in the ashes. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of the silence. I was free in it. The silence in the room after Talia closed her briefcase was oppressive, like the breath held too long in the chest of a house that had finally heard the truth spoken aloud. My family sat in stunned silence, and I remained standing, steady and composed, as if I were chairing a regulatory board meeting instead of presiding over the formal collapse of everything they'd once used to define themselves. Talia stepped forward, heels precise against the tile. "The divorce proceedings will move quickly. We've already filed. Damon will receive formal notice this week. Financial disclosures are due within 15 business days." Damon looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the right words. His mouth opened, then shut. I knew that look, the look of a man who had built a fantasy on the belief that I'd never retaliate, never fight back. He had confused my restraint for fragility, a mistake he wouldn't make again. Talia continued. "We are filing under grounds of adultery, emotional distress, and intentional infliction of harm. Given the evidence, we'll also pursue financial recompense for the misuse of joint assets and misrepresentation of travel expenses. He flinched at that. Recompense? You're seriously. Damon. I cut him off, my tone flat. You spent our shared income on spa visits, hotel rooms, and designer cribs while lying to my face. This isn't personal. It's procedural. Brielle stood up, rocking Isla in her arms, clearly panicked. Marissa, you can't go after me professionally. This was between you and him. Talia raised an eyebrow. Actually, as a licensed nurse, your conduct violates several ethical standards. We have documentation of inappropriate personal behavior with a married man, including activity inside a hospital facility. You used your public platform to glorify this relationship without disclosing the full context. That's a matter for the licensing board. Are you trying to destroy me? Brielle hissed, eyes blazing. I met her gaze. No, you did that yourself. She paled. Her arms instinctively tightened around the baby. My parents looked as if they were carved from stone. My father's jaw was tight. My mother's eyes darted from Brielle to Damon to me, like she was finally realizing the cost of staying silent for so long. I turned to them. The house, I said evenly, will be listed for sale. I've spoken with the real estate agent who handled the original deed. My name is still attached to the property as a co-trustee, which means my legal rights extend beyond the emotional mess we've made here. My mother's voice finally cracked through the silence. Marissa, please. The community. What about the community? I asked. The one you've curated with potlucks and bake sales? Do you think they won't find out? Do you think they'll keep smiling when they realize you stood by and let your daughter raise a baby with her sister's husband? She didn't answer. Talia turned to them. The reputation damage in Rosebridge is already beginning. People talk. That video's been circulating. What video? Brielle's voice snapped. I turned to her slowly. The one you posted. The one you didn't lock. The one that showed Damon in the hospital room. The one Slatebridge has archived, copied, and analyzed in forensic detail. But I deleted it, she cried. You deleted it too late. She sank back down onto the couch, eyes wide. I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered every lie. Every birthday she skipped. Every excuse she gave. Every look she gave me when she thought I wasn't watching, smug, self-satisfied, as if she had finally won something. You were always the star, I said, almost softly. Mom and Dad fawned over you like you were a miracle. I stopped trying to compete with that a long time ago. But what I never expected was that they'd all protect you while you burned my life down. My father finally spoke. We didn't know how to tell you. We didn't want to make things worse. I tilted my head. You didn't want to be uncomfortable. You didn't want to confront the mess you enabled. So instead, you buried it. You let Brielle keep lying. You let Damon keep pretending. And you thought I'd just live in the dark. He swallowed hard. You've always been so strong. I laughed under my breath. That doesn't mean I deserved betrayal. Talia checked her watch. We'll be in touch with updated timelines and asset breakdowns. In the meantime, we ask all parties not to interfere or contact Marissa directly. Damon looked at me. I made a mistake. I know I did. But there was something missing and You looked for softness in the wrong place, I interrupted. What you really wanted was permission to be weak. And Brielle gave you that. I didn't wait for another reply. I nodded at Talia and we turned toward the door. As we walked out of that house, the house that used to hold my childhood, my traditions, my illusions, I didn't look back. Not even once. Because there was nothing left inside worth salvaging. In the car, Talia glanced over. You handled that like a seasoned litigator. Years of conditioning, I said. This is just the first phase. She smiled faintly. There's something satisfying about a woman who doesn't crumble. I didn't respond. I just stared ahead. Later that evening, I received a ping on my phone. A news alert. Strathmore Equity VP steps down amid internal investigation. My eyes narrowed. The article cited inconsistencies in travel reports and undisclosed conflicts of interest. It didn't mention Damon by name. Not yet. But I knew the story was building. A second alert. Internal notice from the St. Helene's Medical Licensing Board. They had received my complaint and launched a preliminary ethics review into Brielle's conduct. An attached PDF showed the status: active, under consideration. I sat at my desk, sifting through the documentation. Every receipt, every email, every text. I printed the letters from the licensing board and tucked them into my growing binder. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted accountability. I looked up at the photo that used to sit on my desk. Now, a new one had taken its place, a framed quote I'd ordered last week. "You're not too much." They were just not enough. For once, I believed it. The facade had collapsed. And beneath it, there was finally room to breathe. The sun crept across my desk, warm and golden, as if to personally congratulate me for making it to this version of my life. 1 year. It had been exactly 12 months since that morning in my parents' living room. Since I laid bare every betrayal, every truth, with the precision of a surgeon and the control of a judge. Now, the office I sat in wasn't just mine in title. It was mine in spirit. Executive Director of Compliance at Navexa Biopharma. My corner suite was bigger, quieter, and bathed in light. The walls were a soft slate blue, the color I picked after rejecting the sterile corporate beige they originally proposed. Everything inside this space had intention, from the shelves of leather-bound casebooks to the clean, angular glass desk. Even the framed photo on the side table, not a wedding picture, not a family portrait, but a snapshot of me standing at a Women in Bioethics panel, holding the mic, mid-sentence, commanding the room. I turned a page in the Business Herald, the feature headline still catching my eye: Compliance Queen, How Marissa Grant Rewrote the Rules After Scandal. The photo below it showed me in this very office, mid-laugh, unusual for me, but fitting. I hadn't even noticed the journalist taking the photo. The article had gone viral within the industry. Women from companies I'd never heard of sent me LinkedIn messages, thanking me for showing that calm power wins, for not making my survival a spectacle. I'd become a symbol somehow. And it was still strange to think of myself that way. I wasn't trying to become anyone's icon. I had just decided not to disappear. My phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen. News alert: Strathmore Equity Executive resigns amid misconduct allegations. My chest didn't tighten. My pulse didn't skip. I just tapped the notification and read. Damon Grant, former Vice President of Client Relations, had officially stepped down. The article danced around the reasons, phrases like undisclosed personal relationships, improper reporting of travel expenses, and failure to uphold internal compliance standards. There was no mention of me. But there didn't need to be. The industry whispered louder than any publication ever could. A second link popped up, his new job listing. Advisory consultant. Water's Edge, Oregon. A name I hadn't heard in years. Small firm. Barely any visibility. He was out of the spotlight. Just where he deserved to be. I turned back to my laptop, clicking through quarterly reports, but another alert caught my eye, this one local. St. Helene's Medical Board decision released. Brielle Grant license revoked. I froze for a fraction of a second, then clicked. The summary was short. Brielle had failed to disclose personal relationships that compromised the privacy of patients and misused hospital space for personal gain. Her license was not suspended, it was revoked. Permanently. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded across my ribcage, eyes closed. Not out of glee. Not even relief. Just quiet validation. There had been a time when I needed every ounce of proof, every piece of fallout, to believe I wasn't crazy. That time had passed. But it was still satisfying to see justice play out in official language. Brielle, from what I heard through distant channels, was living back with my parents. No job. No license. No public platform. She hadn't posted a vlog in nearly 8 months. Her channel was dormant, her comments section long disabled. She was raising Isla alone now. Damon, according to court filings, had requested shared custody, but I wasn't sure where that landed. I didn't ask. I didn't follow up. There was no place for curiosity where I had built my boundaries. As for my parents, they'd sold the family home 3 months after everything unraveled. Too much tension in the neighborhood, too many whispers at the grocery store, too many stares at church. Their polished, performative image didn't survive the exposure. They relocated to a nearby suburb, downsized, withdrew from several community boards. My mother tried reaching out once, a soft email with a photo of Isla in a pink onesie. No subject line. No apology. Just an image, like that could erase what had happened. I deleted it without replying. I had no obligation to heal what they broke. Instead, I built something entirely my own. I looked down at my to-do list, neatly written in a notebook with cream pages and gold-tipped edges. Most of the tasks were mundane, contracts to review, policies to update, but they all belonged to me. Every project, every regulation enforced, was another piece of my life stitched together without anyone else's thread. The office door cracked open slightly. Ms. Grant. It was Chloe, one of the new analysts. Sharp, observant, young enough to still call me Ms., even when I insisted otherwise. You're 10:30s here, but I told her to wait until you were ready. I nodded. Give me 5. She closed the door again with quiet respect. I could hear her murmuring instructions to the guest just outside. Chloe had joined the team 6 months ago, and I'd taken an interest in mentoring her. Not because she reminded me of myself. I had never been that open, that trusting, but because I saw in her someone who wanted to learn how to be formidable without becoming hard. Mentorship had become something I never expected. Every month, someone asked me to speak at a workshop or sit on a panel. Younger women in compliance and regulatory circles treated me like a compass, calling me calm, brilliant, even brave. Brave. That word still made me pause. I never thought of my actions as bravery. Survival, maybe. Precision, definitely. But bravery? I suppose in a world where women were expected to stay quiet and forgive, refusing to do either was its own kind of bold. I turned my chair slightly, facing the window. The city looked clean and bright from here, as if no dark thing had ever taken root in it. I'd built a rhythm now, yoga on Saturdays, brunch with the few friends who remained after the implosion, late-night classical playlists while I sorted through legal case studies just because they calmed me. I didn't check Brielle's channel anymore. I hadn't searched Damon's name in months. I didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. And I had done mine. I allowed myself one indulgent moment, standing, walking to the side table where my favorite candle burned softly, amber, cedar, and something slightly floral. A scent I chose myself. My home smelled like that now, too. Everything in my life was chosen, not inherited, not imposed. As I smoothed my blazer and picked up my notes for the next meeting, I glanced one last time at the framed quote near my desk. Peace is not passive. It's designed. And I had designed this piece down to the last breath. I'd always thought peace would come in some dramatic wave, maybe after slamming a door, signing the last document, or confronting the people who had torn my life in half. But it didn't arrive like that. There was no swell of music, no cinematic crescendo. It came quietly, like the slow, rhythmic inhale after a storm has passed. And in its own understated way, it felt far more powerful. Saturday mornings had become sacred. I moved through my apartment like someone preserving a sanctuary, no blaring headlines, no rushed emails. Just light filtering in through floor-length curtains and the muted hum of the city beneath me. Today, I moved barefoot across the hardwood floors, yoga mat rolled out in the corner of the living room, incense curling upward like a question without urgency. I sat cross-legged and took a long, steady breath. Outside, Rosebridge buzzed to life. Dog walkers, joggers, neighbors passing by with paper coffee cups. Inside, it was just me. My body had become familiar again, not something I clenched or defended, but something I lived in. The instructor's voice drifted from my speakers. Let your breath soften the edges of anything sharp inside. I smiled at that. There wasn't much sharpness left. Just shape, structure, choice. When the session ended, I padded into the kitchen and made coffee, real coffee, not the automatic kind. I measured the grounds, poured the hot water slowly, and let the aroma settle into the room. These small acts weren't luxuries. They were reclamations. Every moment of stillness, every new ritual, was something I chose for myself. No one else's needs woven in. No one else's lies to decode. As I stood by the counter, sipping the dark roast from a thick ceramic mug, I glanced at the shelf where my planner and candle collection lived. Last week, I had finally deleted the folder labeled Slatebridge Archives. The one filled with screenshots, audio clips, hotel receipts, evidence I once clung to like a life vest. I'd kept it long after I needed it, telling myself it was for closure. But I hadn't opened the files in months. And when I hovered over the delete button, my finger didn't even tremble. The weight of proof no longer anchored me. I didn't need receipts for something I had already survived. And the YouTube archive, Brielle's channel, was gone, too. I'd tracked it for a while, watched her subscriber count drop, noted the absence of new posts. But eventually, even that curiosity dulled. I didn't need to check on her anymore. I didn't need to know if she regretted anything. Her life was hers now, just as mine was mine. And I had no intention of weaving them back together. That morning, I grabbed a cardigan and headed to the Saturday flower market. It had become a new tradition, walking through stalls bursting with color, brushing past sunflowers and eucalyptus, tulips and wild roses. The woman who ran the peony stand now recognized me, always tucking in an extra stem. "You again," she'd say with a grin. "You've got a good eye." It was a simple thing, but it mattered. I was building a life made of intention, not performance. Afterward, I met Celeste and Hannah for brunch, two women I'd met through a local professional women's group. Our friendships had grown slowly, without force. We didn't talk about past betrayals. We talked about career goals, meditation techniques, new restaurants. We talked about the present, about what was still ahead. I hadn't known how much I needed that, relationships not steeped in shared history, but rooted in mutual respect. "You look lighter," Celeste said as I sipped my mimosa. "I feel lighter," I replied. And I did. Later that afternoon, I walked through the neighborhood, arms filled with the day's flowers, feeling the ease of movement I hadn't known in years. No one was waiting for me at home. No one was texting a lie or spinning a story or pulling me into an emotional maze. I had made my life simple not by shrinking it, but by choosing what and who I allowed inside. When I returned, I placed the flowers in tall glass vases and set them in every room. White peonies on the kitchen counter, sunflowers in the living room, lavender stems in the bathroom. My home was a place that didn't just look beautiful, it felt sacred. That night, I curled into the armchair by the window with a glass of wine and opened my laptop, not to check compliance reports or family updates, but to write a long, meandering email to my best friend, Alina, who had moved to Seattle years ago. We'd stayed in touch through everything, and she'd been one of the few people who never offered pity, just presence. I told her about the flower market, about the brunch, about the new intern at work who reminded me of myself at 25, sharp, reserved, hungry to prove something but unsure where to aim it. I told her I was finally mentoring people, and not just professionally. I was showing them how to hold their boundaries without losing their empathy, how to lead with both head and heart. She said I sounded like someone becoming whole again. And she was right. For a long time, I thought being emotionally composed meant I was cold, that I had to overcompensate, soften myself for others to feel safe around me. But now I understood the difference. I wasn't cold. I was discerning. I didn't wall people out, I invited in the ones who were worthy. I lit one of my favorite candles, its warm notes of amber and fig curling through the room. The soft playlist I'd made, mostly cello, piano, the occasional acoustic cover, filled the space as I let myself lean back, completely at ease. There was no noise, no lingering urgency, no unfinished conversations in my head. This was the peace I had designed. I no longer needed to chase justice. I had it. I no longer needed to seek validation. I was it. And I no longer feared the quiet. Because I had learned how to live inside it, not hide from it. The version of me that had once begged for visibility, who'd worked for love that never came, who'd walked into a room already bracing for disappointment, she wasn't here anymore. She had been transformed. Not erased, not hardened, but honored and then released. In her place stood someone who had stitched a life from the truth, not the pieces left behind by others. I closed my laptop. I extinguished the candle. I turned off the music and let the silence settle again. It wasn't empty. It was mine. The morning light spilled across the bedroom like a warm invitation, and for once, I didn't rush to meet the day. I sat at the edge of the bed, my robe tied loosely at the waist, coffee warming my palms, the soft hum of strings playing from the speaker near the window. It was presentation day, an executive board meeting I had led for weeks to prepare, and yet I felt no anxiety. No nervous flutter. Just calm, grounded certainty. I knew who I was now, and that changed everything. My navy blazer hung on the closet door, crisp and structured, paired with a pearl necklace that Damon once called too formal. I'd nearly sold it during the divorce, but something told me to keep it, like an heirloom of who I used to be and who I chose to become. It felt right today, not as a memory of him, but a reminder that I'd never needed anyone's permission to shine. In the mirror, I checked my reflection. Hair smooth, skin luminous, lips painted in the soft mauve tone I always reserved for days I needed clarity. I didn't look fierce. I didn't need to. I looked complete. My phone buzzed on the dresser. A simple notification popped up. Dinner with Elliot, tonight at 7 p.m. Confirmed. I smiled to myself. Not because of butterflies or fantasies, but because it felt good. Simple. Intentional. Elliot was a literature professor I'd met through a dating app 6 weeks ago. We started with coffee, cautious texts, and gentle, thoughtful conversations. He didn't ask invasive questions. He didn't rush. He respected space. He noticed things. Like the way I preferred silence over filler talk. Or how I always read acknowledgments at the back of books before the actual chapters. He'd shared poetry instead of pickup lines. Asked about my favorite scent instead of my dress size. He never pressed about my past, only asked what I loved about my present. We'd had 3 dinners. Tonight would be the 4th. I tapped the message open and responded. Looking forward to it. We're something that makes you feel like a comma, not a period. He'd know what I meant. That was the thing about him, he always did. The car ride to Navexa felt almost ceremonial. Rosebridge was blooming into spring, and for the first time in years, I saw it as a place of newness, not just memory. The trees that once framed my morning commutes with melancholy now looked bold, alive, reaching. I was reaching too, not for what I'd lost, but for what I could still create. At headquarters, the glass doors greeted me like old friends. The receptionist smiled when she saw me. Boardroom's already set, Ms. Grant. You've got about 15 minutes. Perfect, I said. I made my way through the halls I used to haunt like a ghost, there but unseen. Now, every step echoed with presence. Colleagues didn't just greet me, they mirrored me. I'd become someone they trusted to hold the line, ask the right questions, and show them that strength didn't have to be loud to be undeniable. In the boardroom, I set up my notes, adjusted the slide deck, and placed a carafe of lemon water at each end of the table. Details mattered. Not because they impressed people, but because they demonstrated care. My care. My command. When the directors filed in, I greeted each one with eye contact and a firm nod. Not all of them had believed in me during my rise. Some had labeled me too reserved, too clinical. But time had proven otherwise. Time, and the way I carried myself when my world collapsed, earned me something better than popularity. Respect. I began the presentation with a simple phrase, "Good morning. Let's begin." And I meant it in every way. I walked them through a new compliance framework I'd spent months designing, one that balanced employee autonomy with integrity. The numbers were strong. The risks well assessed. The response was exactly what I'd envisioned, engaged, impressed, decisive. When I concluded, the chairman leaned forward. "This is your best work yet, Marissa." I gave a soft nod. "It's the most honest work I've done." The meeting wrapped with handshakes and quiet praise. No applause. No fanfare. Just something better, certainty. I had shown them a new standard. Not just for compliance. For resilience. For what it looked like to rebuild without bitterness. Back in my office, I closed the door gently and walked to the window. The sun glinted off the river in the distance, and for a moment I let myself pause. Not to remember, but to honor. The woman who had walked through betrayal, who'd endured public humiliation, who'd taken on her own family without flinching, that woman had earned this peace. She didn't just survive. She transformed. I sat at my desk and opened my journal, the one I kept now, not out of need, but out of ritual. Today's entry wasn't long. You are no longer an aftermath. You are the architect, the author, the answer. I closed the journal, took a slow breath, and let the silence fill the room. Later that evening, I arrived at the restaurant early. Elliot was already there, seated at a table by the window, a book open in front of him. He wore a dark green shirt that brought out the warmth in his eyes, and when he looked up, he smiled, not too broadly, not with some performance of romance, but with ease. The kind of smile that says, I see you exactly as you are, and I like what I see. You're early, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. So are you, he replied, which means we're equally curious. I laughed. Or equally punctual. He lifted his glass of wine in a subtle toast. To the power of curiosity, then. I raised mine to meet his. And to what's next. We didn't talk about pain. We didn't analyze the past. We talked about poetry, gardens, languages we wished we could speak, and whether time really moved faster when we stopped trying to control it. I didn't know where this would go. I wasn't placing hope on it like a fragile glass waiting to shatter. I was just allowing it. Allowing me. When I returned home, the city lights outside my window glimmered like quiet possibilities. I slipped off my blazer, set my shoes neatly by the door, and let the evening settle around me. In the stillness, I whispered aloud, no one there to hear it but me. Let's begin. Not revenge. Not closure. Just life. Finally mine.